Hello everybody and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 250. Fuck, it's not written down on the document, Bally. I was like, what number is this? And then I went to the document to look at what the number was, and all I see is Nintendo Life 37. So Bally, what number episode is this?
I think it's 252.
That's correct. Yeah, the EV number, the number that you need if you want max HP, max defense, 252, get that spread in there, and also I think 4. You got 4 left over, right? So put that 4 into like HP or attack or whatever. Anyway, this is episode 252.
God, that took me a long time to remember that reference, but I get it now.
No, you know exactly what I'm talking about,
what you're talking about, yeah.
EV spreads, all right? This is how we dominate the meta game. I always did find it interesting when people would put EV spreads out there and they'd be like, 176 in this, 84. And I'm like, you're a real nerd because I don't know what these numbers are for to make those hit. I'm just going to put max in defense, max in HP, and just not worry about it, you know? That was the Blissey game, right? Just max defense, max HP. And you'd be fine. It'd be a fun old time. But for those of you in the audience who are not Pokemon nerds, hello, welcome. This is a Nintendo podcast, and it welcomes all sorts, talking about video games. Pokemon tangentially related. I was thinking of something recently, Bally, and I wanted to ask you about this. Do you remember the CD To Be a Master? And did you ever own this CD?
I can't remember. Where would I have picked up the CD?
I don't know. So this was a CD that had all the Pokemon music on it from the TV show. So it had like the main theme. It had a bunch of songs that showed up in the anime.
It's basically all the songs from season 1 anime.
Yes, I think so.
Like the Poker Rap and...
Yes, the Poker Rap was on there. And there was also a song called To Be a Master, which it was named after.
To Be a Master.
Exactly. Pokemon Master. So, it was great. And I just remember falling asleep to this soundtrack at night, and there was one really sad song on it, and I think it's the one that they did when Pikachu left or something, and I can't remember what it's called or what it sounded like, but my main thing after we record this episode is go and find that song, because I don't know, this just jumped into my memory, and I'm like, to be a master, and we are always striving to be masters here on this podcast. So
I remember this was maybe just before the start of the pandemic, just on one of our Skype calls, and we were watching a video together of basically all of the starter songs from all the different seasons of Pokemon, back to back, and it started incredibly nostalgic, and then I don't know, Gen 3, 4, it dropped off, and we were like, these are cool songs, but now I have zero reference.
We don't know it. Yeah, there's no connection
is,
to them.
Yeah.
What would you rank? What's your kind of number one of that era in terms of songs?
Oh, I really like the Johto intro.
Johto's a solid one. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be a master. Everybody wants to show their skills. That one. And then
yes, that's a good one. Yeah.
That just has the most Saturday morning vibes for me out of all of them. That's the one that I really loved the most, I think.
Yeah, I've not gone back and watched because everyone was going mad about Ash, finally becoming...
Yeah, part of me is like, I want to go down that train.
Right.
I want to go on that route, how do you feel about going down that deep dark hole?
It's available. I think what because Tim Getty's on Kind of Funny kept talking about it, and I was like, well, I guess what he says is just watch those 4 episodes, which is that one fight, basically that one final fight, which I think is probably a thing that I could do. Those are short. Anime is short; it's 20 minutes long, right? So wouldn't take long to get through it. But it feels like closing a loop, but it's weird because you're closing a loop on a thing where you've seen maybe 10% of the actual thing because what you watched was the very beginning. And it's been going for 2 decades since then. So but that would be cool because the battle I always remember is the fucking Orange Islands final fight.
Oh, absolutely, versus Drake. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly.
And he's got a Dragonite, but he is not Lance, but he still has a Dragonite. And
that that fight is one of those where I'm like, oh shit, he could actually win this and become the champion, but he doesn't, right? And then he continues to lose every single one after that. But that to me is the beginning of oh, Ash could maybe do this. Oh, I mean, it took him 20 years, but he finally did. But yeah.
But that was a fight across 2 episodes, and it was a full 6-on-6, which you saw so rarely in the anime, and it was just really well edited. I even want to argue that they might have been the only episodes without Team Rocket intervening. I could be completely wrong on that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe they were in the back. they might have been in the crowd or something, right? They're probably
yeah.
hanging out in the crowd doing some.
Or they might have
stuff.
even interrupted the fight almost sarcastically and being
Yeah.
like, "You thought we wouldn't be in this special episode, but we're actually still going to do our." I can't even remember now.
Or they get knocked out into the sky. No one notices it happens. Like Dragonite like sneezes or something, and they go or something like that.
I think. Now you're onto something.
Yeah, that probably is what they would do.
Those Orange Island episodes are really cool, and
Yeah.
I would actually argue that a lot of those ideas for the Orange Islands were then repeated in a game like Pokemon Sun and Moon, for example.
Oh, true.
Where it's island focused, and then the gym battles aren't traditional battles. They're like different types of challenges, and that's what they did in that game. Even though it was like, I don't know, 15 years later, 16 years later.
I remember us always wanting there to be an Orange Islands game. We're like, make Pokemon Orange, like it'd be so good. I feel like that has to exist as a ROM hack out there. Like, I'm willing to bet someone has made a ROM hack that basically breaks down the entire Orange Islands arc into a thing, and you have to ride a Lapras around. Another thing I need to go look up after we've recorded this episode, is there an Orange Island hack for Pokemon? There probably is. But if anyone in the audience knows about it, let us know. Shout us out on the Discord.
If they eventually did a really impressive, open world style, like Violet and I was gonna say Violet and Sapphire, Violet and Scarlet,
Scarlet and Violet,
Scarlet and Violet style remake of Red and Blue, and then the DLC was Orange Islands. Now we're talking. Oh, and the game has to actually run well. That's the other caveat. It has to run well.
Unfortunately,
gotta get that in.
One of these things is not like the other, and that is probably not going to happen. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I could see it happening just because all the Pokemon Company does is remake Red and Blue. Like, there are 4.
I don't have many issues with that, to be honest. Red and Blue are great. They're great.
They are good. I wish they would give Gold and Silver more love.
That's also fair. Yeah.
Which they have done in the DS remake and stuff like that. But
that's a long time ago now. A DS remake.
Have Red and Blue been remade twice or 3 times? Because it was remade for Fire Red, Leaf Green, GBA. Then it was remade for Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee. I think those are the only.
I think those are the only ones. But it's not just the strict remakes that they really get everything out of Red and Blue. It's all like, it's the Pokemon they choose in the new games. It's everything else that's not like second there's a spin-off. That the most Pokemon, I would argue, in new Pokemon Snap are from Red and Blue. Like I would guess, and stuff like that.
Yeah, they still make it so that any new Pokemon game, the Pokédex still has good representation from those original creatures. Yeah. So, makes sense. But anyway,
sorry, one last side tangent Pokemon question.
Yeah.
If you imagine we're Gen 1 boys, so like we got into Pokemon at the Gen 1 era. Which gen of fan boys and girls make up the largest group of the Pokemon fan base worldwide currently?
Very interesting. Largest percentage.
Yeah.
I want to say like Ruby, Sapphire, Diamond, Pearl era, because those people were kids, are now kind of early 20s.
Mid-20s?
Yeah, and I feel like mid-20s have a lot of disposable income now, were into Pokemon, coming back to Pokemon.
They have more disposable income than kids. I wouldn't say they have a lot of disposable income, but yeah.
No, but like, I think like because they're kind of an era where video games are not like the worst thing possible, so they probably grew up continuing to play it throughout that whole time and not being stigmatized and moving away. Because I think a lot of people who played Red and Blue back in the day, they played it as kids, then they were like, oh, I'm an adult now, I don't play video games, and then they moved away from it. And
I feel like video games are a bit more cool than they used to be.
Yeah, maybe it's 4th/5th gen. Like maybe that's the era who are the biggest representation, because they started there and they're still doing it now. And there was a lot of them at the time because the DS was such a smash hit in terms of numbers.
Right.
So yeah.
I think it's interesting that, like, as we've just said, Red and Blue are referenced all the time, but we're now not the biggest, tranche of fans, as it were.
If you're nostalgic for Pokemon, it's because you started with Diamond and Pearl at this point in time.
Right.
Or even later, like Black and White. Like there are 20-year-olds who grew up as kids playing Black and White. That's where we're at right now.
Oh my God.
I know that's terrifying for everyone to hear, especially listeners of this podcast, because according to our analytics, our biggest demographic is I think 28 to 35 or 34 or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, we're all in that boat, everybody. We're slowly slowly melting into the ground. But we'll halt that for a second because we're on this video game Nintendo podcast to talk about Nintendo video games. Bally, what are we going to be talking about today on this podcast?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and for the second segment, we're going to answer some emails that people have sent in.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it, Bally. We have not played a huge amount. We have been playing a huge amount, but we've been playing like other games on other platforms, and I decided to buy Final Fantasy 16, and that's taken over my life, and you're trying to finish Jedi Survivor.
I'm at the end of Jedi Survivor.
So while that all happens in the background, Nintendo decided to grace us with a nice little thing that we can talk about, which is the Mario Kart DLC that came out. So this dropped, I think, a couple of days ago now. It's the 5th wave, so we've got one more to go, and I believe they said all of them were going to be out by the end of 2023. So I don't know, did you see a scenario where the Game Awards is like, and now the Mario Kart DLC is available, the last wave of it?
December seems like quite a long way away for the last wave. I'd put more money on like November. I don't know.
Oh, okay. But,
also, I feel like Nintendo and the Game Awards have gone downhill in the last few years. What was the last big announcement Nintendo went for at the Game Awards?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember. Like I deliberately just don't stay up and watch it anymore. Not only because then I have to work the next day, but also like the Game Awards is one of those shows that it's just better on fast forward. It's just better because there's so much bullshit in the middle that it's like 1.5 times speed in the morning is just like the best way to handle that thing.
I enjoy watching it 1.5 in the morning as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
My new life with Bally Jr., like there's just no option of staying up and watching it. And because it starts at like 1 a.m. our time. It's just a stupid time, but yeah.
Right. So it doesn't make sense for us to do that. And I think also it doesn't make sense because like Nintendo haven't really done anything. I think maybe Joker in Smash Brothers was the last like big thing that people went crazy about. But yeah, they just haven't been showing up to Jeff's show, so I don't know what, there's some bad blood there or what, or just he doesn't have Furukawa's number on speed dial. Reggie left, he was friends with Reggie for a while. Don't know what his relationship was like with Doug Bowser, but anyway, you're right, actually. It is like we're in July, so I'm thinking like, oh, we're gonna get it like end of year because that's what's coming, but we're only halfway through the year.
Do you remember when Wave 4 was?
I don't know. I think it was maybe tied up with the one of the Nintendo Directs that happened earlier in the year, potentially. Maybe it was in like, I can't remember when that was. It was February, maybe was one of those, but I don't know. It's a weird cadence. I don't think there's too much consistency to when they put these out, but at least they are guaranteed before the end of 2023. And this new one dropped. We both had a chance to play through it. I played through all the tracks on Grand Prix. And got 3 stars gold first time on both, which I think is the first time I've done that for anything from the DLC, because usually there's one errant red shell right at the end that fucks me up and I don't get the 3 stars, I get the 2 stars and I have like 58 points at the end instead of 60, which is always like the worst feeling, is like the last race you just suddenly get Mario Karted, quote unquote, and you lose that perfect streak. But I got 3 stars perfect on both, which I felt good about, and then I went and did a bit of time trials on each one just to kind of look at the track a bit more. And because I think one of the fun things that we've done over the past, like looking at these Mario Kart DLCs, is the Mario Kart Tour tracks in particular are interesting from a real world perspective of like, what did they do here? How did they represent this place? So yeah, we can maybe get into those specifics, but overall, how do you feel about this set of tracks, Bally?
It's a strong wave. I liked it a lot. I played through them with Caroline. We did all of them. I think we did the Feather Cup twice and the Cherry Cup once. And yeah, I really like some of these courses, especially like Cooper Cape and Daisy Cruiser. Such a classic from Double Dash. And then I always love it when they kind of really revamp a GBA or SNES track, and Sunset Wilds I think looks really, really nice. And then for like a brand new course, I think Squeaky Clean Sprint is very, very fun.
Yeah, I think they're a solid bunch. I feel like, and this is to do with the tour stuff and like how the cities are represented, I feel like when I was driving through LA, I was like, this could be any like West Coast like city in America, or like any kind of generic city in.
But isn't that how you
senses.
felt when you were in LA?
Right, like, I mean, LA is so tacky and like nothing, and like, yeah, that kind of is what this is.
LA's number one fan right over here, Emmy said.
There's a real lack of identity. I think, like, there's some fun little nods in there. So, you go through a baseball stadium, which I imagine is referencing some stadium in LA, but like, again, that's a point.
Can you name the 2 LA baseball teams?
The Dodgers.
That's one.
And the Chargers? Question mark?
Chargers.
No, that's like that's probably some other.
No, they're not
some
baseball.
other sport, I imagine.
No. The Angels.
The Angels. Never heard of them, but I know the Dodgers. I've heard that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I imagine that's like one of their stadiums. But that's kind of to the point of like, it's a baseball stadium. It's probably somewhere in America, right? But there was a fun little thing, which I don't think is an E3 nod so much as a LA. Like, hey, there's lots of conventions that happen in LA, but there is a sign that says the Mario Expo. I don't know if you call that.
Oh, fun. I missed that.
Which I was like, oh, okay. So they are kind of toying with, what the city is known for, what its identity is. And I guess, yeah, a place like LA doesn't have an identity aside from there are celebrities that live there, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's all about Hollywood, Beverly Hills, the pier that I've forgotten the name of already, and the beach.
Yeah, I didn't go to the pier. I mean, I went to the waterfront in San Francisco, which I don't know if that's more iconic than LA, but I don't know. I kind of felt like they were amalgamating the two together, but maybe that's just because I didn't go to the coast when I was over there in LA. But yeah, I don't know. It does. These tracks continue to just be cool from some perspectives, but then I find them more forgettable because they are just based on real world
I think I would actually appreciate them more if they didn't do the every lap changes, because ultimately kind of you build up a familiarity with a track by racing around the same track 3 times, and when you're not doing that on these location courses, it's much harder to remember. Like if I passed that Mario sign you just talked about on the LA course, if I passed that 3 times, I might have remembered and seen it, but the fact that I probably would have only had maybe 1, maximum 2 chances to see it, maybe makes me like a little less, it's harder to relate to the course.
Yeah, you have to play it so many more times in order for it to kind of burn into your memory, which, like, it's just, I do think that there is a flaw in the design of these because of the arrows, right? The arrows having to have, the fact that they have to put arrows in there just says that there's a fundamental weakness in the actual design of this, because what we expect from Nintendo design is, okay, it's so intuitive. You'll understand it immediately. You'll know where this corner is because we've built it so that you can see it coming up and you can anticipate it and you can turn. And it's just simply not the case in these tracks because they are city-based and they change every single time. There's a point at which you realize, like, oh, I can't like anticipate this myself, and I have to, in essence, just look at the arrows as opposed to look at the track itself and identify what are the places that I should be going and what are the places that I should be kind of going around. So I felt that way mainly about the LA one, but I do think that there are some city-focused tracks that are better, and the one that really stood out to me in this is Athens Dash, which of course is based on Athens in Greece, and I think part of the distinction there is that I mean, like, cities in America, or even like the Canada one, the Vancouver one, which I think is definitely much more interesting. They are like just they're cities with buildings, right? And they're like modern buildings, and that's just what they look like. Whereas in Greece, there is a history. And I think like America's lack of history means that you can't go back and have interesting architecture. But Greece is great because, especially in Athens, that architecture still exists, and you can go and look at it, and you can go up to the Parthenon, and you can experience like the architectural design of that era, and like the modern design of buildings in Greece is not too dissimilar to that. Like there's obviously modern stuff all over the place, but there's still buildings that people live in that are kind of more ancient in their architecture in a sense.
You're good on classics. 2 questions about Greece. Mount Olympus is completely mythological, isn't it? It's not real.
No, I believe there is a mountain called Mount Olympus.
Really?
Yes, I believe that is the case. Maybe look it up on Google and prove me wrong, but I believe that the mountain itself is real.
Oh,
the mythological kind of stuff around it, like it exists because people back then looked at the mountain and thought, hey, that's really high. And obviously back then you're not going to climb a mountain that high.
Olympus is real, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously Grecians looked at that and thought, well, that's where the gods live, obviously, because it's so high in the sky.
The Parthenon, which is on its own much
Yes.
smaller mountain inside Athens.
Yeah.
Is that the building that Hercules goes to in the Disney film to speak to Zeus? Is there a statue of Zeus inside the Parthenon?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe there's Zeus inside the Parthenon. I want to say it might be that. It might be another building, but there's definitely a Zeus kind of monument somewhere there. I think it is the Parthenon. I don't think you can actually go inside the Parthenon, because when we went there like 7-8 years ago, you can walk around and there's like kind of barriers that kind of block you off and stuff from going inside.
Right.
But this was, again, this is one of my favorite tracks here, and one of my favorite tour tracks that they brought in, because it is really leaning into that stuff, right? Like architecturally, it's so different. It shows all the different kind of styles of buildings, and you kind of go up, and there is a part where, you know, the glider goes all the way up the hill, and you are kind of up at the Parthenon level, which is very neat.
That is cool.
So yeah, I think of all of the ones like that, that's the one that stood out to me. There's also like a there's like a corner where you turn, and it's almost like a theater, a classic Greek theater setup, where the steps kind of like go all the way down. Amphitheater, yes, go all the way down to the center. Which I saw a lot of those playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well, like those big amphitheaters, and they're still obviously very present. So yeah, I think they did take great touch points from all of that, and because the city in its current state still exhibits a lot of those features, it feels authentic and lived in and real, which is cool.
Right.
So yeah, I think despite, you know, Mario Kart being a cartoonish game, like there are points in this kind of in the tour stuff where they represent it well. Athens Dash was definitely a good one.
It's nice.
Did you think anything of the Vancouver one? Like, I appreciated it was like snowy, and there was like suspension bridges and stuff like that.
I liked it. They've got the ice hockey reference, which I guess is very important for Canadians. So I liked that was in there. I've not been to Vancouver, so I'm like struggling with some of the other references. I'm surprised they didn't do anything like killer whale themed. Like, I know that's a big deal. Like, you can see killer whales on Vancouver Island next to Vancouver. So I don't know. Yeah, it was good. I like it was nighttime. It was autumnal, but also snowy, which I thought was a nice vibe.
Yeah.
Just a more unique vibe, and wasn't just like generic city. And there's like a lot more emphasis on like nature and trees and mountains, but linked to a city, which I think is the vibe they're going for with Vancouver. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of melded together, which was neat, and that was decent.
And I agree, the LA one was quite soulless.
It's probably the most forgettable. Like, I'm trying to look back at some of the old ones. Like, I think like Singapore and Bangkok were really cool.
Right.
Like Amsterdam, I like because I know Amsterdam, and I think there is like a certain flavor to that place that I think is well put across. But like, I don't know, like New York, Tokyo, I felt like the earlier ones had a bit less identity. Like, or maybe I was paying less attention, but I feel like Paris and New York and Tokyo all felt somewhat similar because they're quite modern cities.
Tokyo,
right?
they get all the landmarks in there, but I don't think the track itself feels that interesting because it is just cityscape.
Yeah, exactly.
But they do definitely try and drop in the landmarks.
Yeah. I think that's why the Athens one stands out to me so much, because there's a lack of kind of history in a lot of these locations they've chosen, and they're just much more modern cities generally. So,
but what do you think about the history of Daisy Cruiser?
Daisy Cruiser, I have one question.
That boat's now like over 20 years old. Like, that thing's
it's a jonker. I have a question for you about Daisy Cruiser.
Yes.
Left or right?
I went right, but I don't even think you can go left on the GameCube, I want to say.
Wait, really?
At
the very beginning of Daisy Cruiser, you have two choices, left or right.
Yeah, part of me is convinced you can't go left.
The thing is, like, I have always gone right every single time.
I've always gone right.
Ever since I played it when I was younger.
What you want to do in the GameCube game is you go right, and then when you get to the swimming pool, you want to go around the right side of the swimming pool.
Yes.
Along like the tiles, and then straight down into the long straight. And
that's easier to do if you actually come from the left-hand side, because I went rogue, and for one of the laps, I decided I'm going left this time. Let's see what it feels like. And like it eased better into the next turn because you go down those stairs. And I think coming from the left actually benefits going down into that space.
I feel like Daisy Cruiser has come back once before in a I think it might have been on 3DS, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Because I remember dropping down into that hole and going underwater when the original on Daisy Cruiser is like a dry
It's
basement.
like a storage compartment of the ship, essentially.
Exactly. And then you go up through the fan, whereas I remember dropping down into a flooded basement before, and this remake is just like that. You drop into like the flooded area. So
yeah, it might have been 3DS, right? Because that's where they brought in the whole underwater stuff.
gliding.
So it would have made sense to kind of do that. And I don't know if you noticed, like, there are Toads and Yoshi sitting at the tables that slide.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that there was anyone.
They used to be just completely empty. It was like ghostly tables moving. Although I guess it's meant to be the ship rocking, but
yeah, they're just sliding around with no kind of passengers on board, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas now, and especially also when you go down underwater, there are also people inside glasses or glass kind of compartments looking out, like Shy Guys and Yoshis and stuff. So I'm like, I don't know, they've kind of like added a bit more character to it, which is nice to see. And yeah, there's also those kind of just little added bits of flavor that I'm sure a bunch of YouTube videos go and like compare. This is what it used to look like with what it looks like now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times we look at these tracks and we're like, oh, they just HDified them, but I think they do put a good amount of effort into kind of like refreshing them and, you know, making sure that they add little bells and whistles and references, which I think is quite nice. So, but yeah, Daisy Cruiser is one of those that I just like. The sliding tables is the most iconic part of that track.
Yeah.
Even today, I'm like, oh god, it's right in my way. I need to slide like slightly. It's always like the third lap, I think, where I get caught out on it. But yeah, the sliding table still a bit of a nightmare for me, even at this point in time. Did you remember much about Sunset Wilds as a GBA track, and do you feel they did enough to kind of make it modern?
I don't remember a ton about it, but I just remember Sunsets and Shy Guys. That's all I remember about it, and I really like what they've done with it. I love that the sunset itself is only on the start-finish line. Like that main straight there is the only place you can actually see the sun setting, and I love like the kind of cowboy western theme thing they've gone for, and it's just I love the vibes of the track. I think it's really, really pretty. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and I think, as we've mentioned before, I think the strength of these Super Nintendo GBA courses is their turning is always really fun, because that's all they had to work with.
Yeah.
So I noticed straight away, I was like, oh no, this feels like the turns and the dashes that I can do off of them, the kind of like build up is always enjoyable. There's also like, I don't know if this was reflected back then, but there are a bunch of like dinosaur footprints in the ground. So it's like an excavation, essentially, is what's going on there. Were there Shy Guys that kind of danced around on the track, like being in your way as well?
I don't think the GBA could handle that kind of animation, to be honest. I don't think so. There might have been something on the track. Maybe it was Shy Guys. They certainly weren't dancing in the same way.
Well, they would have been just like sprites, right?
They
just
could have been in
the way.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, they definitely were. It still, even though it's modern, it still felt like a GBA course to me, because I'm like, they're just putting random Shy Guys in the middle of this track. Like, it feels like something they would do back then. So yeah, it's that one's neat. It's a good color palette to it. I always remember Cooper Cape being a tricky course, and I think this reminded me that the cornering on this course is really hard, and there's certain parts where, like, right before the finish line, there's that curve with the water, and there's also the kind of like you know, the barrier that you can go up and do a spin on and stuff like that. I always found that corner really tough. And there's also the corner right at the beginning where you go off the ramp after the Goombas, and like turning that to get into the water. Like, those two corners, they suddenly flooded back to me memories of, oh shit, I don't know how to corner on this course.
Right.
But that one has stuck in my memory quite a bit.
I remember there's like almost like a big S bend where the water is flowing, and it makes the handling around that bend trickier, and then you go down into like the pipe, and there's the underwater section where there's like eels and all this, and like the Mario 64 style eels. Like, I really like Cooper Cape. I remember it as being a really fast track, and that's definitely what I felt playing it again. Yeah,
it definitely is. Like, I think the momentum when you go with the water, where do you go with the rock, where the rock splits left and right? Do you go, which part do you go down usually?
Where the rock splits left and right.
So, you know, when you're in the water and you're about to go down the pipe, you can either go to the right and get a shorter kind of angle directly down the pipe, or you can go to the left and do a big kind of corner around the left-hand side. There's this big like kind of rock in the middle of the water, essentially.
Oh, I think I go right. I can't remember though.
Yeah, I think left works better for me because I like the kind of cornering around there and then getting into the pipe. But yeah, it's these things that just keep coming back to me of like, this is the, not muscle memory, but like I know this is the route that I always take, and I just fall back into that route doing it again, which I think is quite funny, and it shows how much of an impact these courses had back then when we were playing them, that we've maybe like put to the back of our brain, but as soon as you see it again, you're like, oh, I remember every single aspect of this course, which I think is quite neat. I didn't remember too much about Moonview Highway though, and I don't know that it's that interesting of a track. It's very much it's one of those city like with cars tracks, and it's mainly just a speed boost thing where you're trying to line up every speed boost panel to get the maximum. Yeah,
I think what I like the most about it is that it links like a kind of country motorway where it's mainly like pitch black, and you're driving around kind of on the much darker, not very well lit section that's just kind of in the country, and then you go into like this massive metropolis which is really bright lights and all the cars just coming at you, and that's when the speed part starts. Like I like the contrast. It works nicely.
Yeah. There's definitely quite a few of these. Is it like Toad Pike Turnway or something like that?
Toad's Turnpike is the
Toad's
N64
Turnpike,
one. And
yes,
that's been remade. That's been brought back on Mario Kart 8 actually. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I feel like a lot of them are in Mario Kart 8 actually, which is
Toad's Turnpike is in N64 and Mario Kart 8, and then the other one is Mushroom City, which is the other. So these are both nighttime cityscapes basically, and that Mushroom City is in Double Dash.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's. I'm looking through now and I can't see it showing up on any of the courses. But Toad's Turnpike is here. It's in the. It was in the original Mario Kart 8 essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Before all the DLC and everything came in. Yeah, and then the last track to talk about is the brand new one, which is the Squeaky Clean Sprint, which is you're basically tiny in a giant bathroom, Chibi Robo style, essentially. And yeah, I like this one quite a bit. I think it's got a lot of character to it, a lot of personality. There's definitely parts that I haven't seen yet because you need to be a certain kind of height with, like, you know, the water that spouts out at the end. If you get enough lift off of that, then you can glide to a higher point when you go.
I wondered how you got up there.
Yes, because you can see from the beginning that the tap has a bunch of coins on it, right?
Right.
So you actually, at the end, when the water kind of gives you lift, I think it's the toilet like spouting or something, and you you can then get up high and you go to like a shelf where there's a bunch of toothpaste and stuff like that, which is quite neat. And it feels like there is other shortcuts in there that I haven't been able to take a look at yet, but there's some neat stuff there. And I always like these like references that they have of like they take Mario characters and they just slap them onto like, here's a toothpaste with like Toad on it or whatever, right? And they do a lot with that. And going down the drain was
really
fun.
good. And there's like a ring with a diamond in it and like a nail and things that you spot, and like there's all this like gunge that or like sludge that's just down there, like you'd see down a block drain. Like I thought this was a really like clever idea. Like I'm very impressed by like this as a new track.
Yeah, and it's always interesting because like sometimes we get that thing where it's like, oh, it's Yoshi's Island, they're doing a reference to a Mario thing.
Yeah,
and that's I always love that. But I do find it interesting how Mario Kart has always kind of tried to carve its own identity with some of these tracks, where it's like, this isn't a reference to anything in the Mario universe. This is just like a fun idea we had that's a bit wacky and off the wall.
Miyamoto made us. yeah,
exactly. So I think that's cool, and I appreciate that they're still kind of doing that at this point in time. I like these tracks overall. I think just the more that we get of these, the stronger it is as a package, as a game. Like I went on and played a little bit of online afterwards, and you know, some tracks pop up and I'm like, oh right, that's in here and that's in here. And you know, you're almost spoiled for choice when it comes to choosing which one you want to vote for and all that sort of stuff. So I think that the game is like, my respect went up for it from the Wii U original, because I do think this is better than the Wii U original because of stuff like the double items and that type of stuff, and it feels like it's more balanced. But I, you know, finding a kart that I like and feeling like this controls well. Yeah, I think I'm ready to admit it's the best Mario Kart. But I
should have put it on the top 50.
from a favoritism standpoint, I still think 7 is going to be the thing that I like the most because I'm weird. But I'm willing to cede that it's probably the best one from a like pure content standpoint.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I think what we both want from Mario Kart is, let's just do a bit more than GPs, right? Let's just have something else.
Let's give some mission modes and all the character of all like the bosses on the DS version is so unique to that game. Like the DS not only was the first Mario Kart with mission mode, it was also the first online Mario Kart, and it had its own unique courses. It was also the first Mario Kart to bring back retro courses and do new courses at the same time. Like it was the first
revolutionary game, Mario Kart DS,
so
revolutionary.
I think, as much as I don't think maybe the game's aged well in terms of the way it handles, because I mean, I can snake. I don't love snaking. It's tiring, and trying to manipulate tracks in that specific way is quite exhausting, even though it gives you a little bit of a boost. But like, otherwise, other than the controls, that game is doing things, and I think we have a lot to thank for it, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's those Mario Kart DLC tracks. Some fun stuff.
The Acorn Cup and the Spiny Cup to come. They're the last two.
Yeah, which, do you have any, is there anything on your wish list, Bally? It's kind of hard.
DK Mountain from Double Dash.
Is that not in here yet? I want to say that it probably isn't, I guess. You would know.
I swear I would have remembered.
That's the thing. It's like, the problem here is that there are so many courses.
Okay, there's DK Summit from Mario Kart Wii. That's the snowy one.
Right,
which is based on DK Mountain from Double Dash.
Right, but DK Mountain I don't think is in here, because DK Mountain is like...
I really want to Maple Tree Way, and that's already here, so that's awesome. And otherwise I think I'm out. I think it's got everything I want, to be honest.
Yeah, it's crazy. They really have like gone over the top with it. And yeah, I do wish they had less of a reliance on Tour, but like, at the very least, those are tracks that neither of us have any familiarity with, so they are like...
and some of them are really strong tracks, and others are a little weaker, but that's okay.
Yeah. So there you go. That's Mario Kart DLC.
Oh, one more thing I want to say. Kamek, did you see this online?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So you know the character Kamek? Do you know?
Yes, he's now playable, right? So like they've got a bunch of, which I haven't, because I just stick with Raccoon Mario. And
I tried that peeper, and I tried the full shebang. But anyway,
great.
I went away from my vanilla. Kamek has a horn in this game. Do you know what the horn sounds like?
No.
The horn is Kamek's call, or the sound that Kamek makes from Yoshi's Island.
His laugh, basically.
His laugh, or her laugh. But
I don't know.
Their laugh from Yoshi's Island, exactly.
Very nice.
Because it's kind of like a more retro sounding, like, I can't even impersonate it, but it's like that retro sounding thing, and they attributed it to the horn, which I just think is a really nice touch.
I know exactly the sound in my head. Like you just saying it, I'm like, yes, I know that laugh. Like it's
right.
kind of iconic, I would say. But so you're saying when you use the horn item, that's what happens?
Not the item, just the horn.
Oh, you mean like the car horn?
Yeah, the car horn, I should say.
Right,
so when you use when you press the item button, but you don't have an item, you'll blow your car horn.
Of course. How could I forget the most iconic feature of Mario Kart 8 on Wii U? The gamepad horn, where you could just use the gamepad and press a horn. Oh man, people ask why the Wii U failed, and I don't know. They were lunatics, because who wouldn't buy a system where you could just honk a horn on a giant tablet right in front of you? I mean, come on. Should have sold millions. But yeah, I think that will do us for Mario Kart. I've continued to play Octopath Traveler 2. I don't have too much more to say about it. I think like it's. I found myself in a weird position, Bally, where I'm currently over-leveled for where I'm supposed to be.
I think I scared you too much about the grinding, and now you're like, I've got to be this level, got to do this.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, because my whole mantra has been, okay, just make sure everybody's up to the same level, aside from your main character, which I still think is the stupidest fucking thing, because my main character is like level 23 and everyone else is like level 18, and it's like, okay, I guess they're just going to run away with XP, but at the very least I was like, I'll just keep everybody to the same level, and somehow I miscalculated how many level 15 and 16 and 17 chapters there were. And so I was like, oh, the next one for me is a level 17 one. And I didn't realize on the other side of the map there was level 15 and a level 16 one. So I was grinding to get to level 17 one.
Bugger.
And then I was like, I guess I actually have to go and do
You can't blame the game for
so.
that one. Come on.
No, that is on me. That is
on
me.
You.
But my expectation was like, oh, well, 17 is probably my next highest one, because that's how the previous game operated is like it just had such a big jump between levels. That's kind of what I was on.
Just a reminder that for the final boss, all my characters weren't the same level. I had 4 characters that were like my top team and 4 characters that were my B team, and I mixed them together. So I had like a top team that I had 2 teams that had 2 A's and 2 B's, basically,
right.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
So don't feel they all have to be the same level. It's still totally doable without.
Yeah, I'll see where I get with it. If I get annoyed, then I probably
75 hours later, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I feel like I'm making good pace with it at least
That's
at
good.
this point
That's
in time.
good.
So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, that's going to do it for the first segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break with some emails. See you in a bit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. It is time for emails. We've actually got quite a few emails come through recently. So,
we do, yeah.
I mean, I'll obviously still shout out the email address, which is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. But yeah, the well is a bit more full of liquid, you might say. What do you call a full well?
Don't say that, Bally. You can't curse us. It's always dry. There's never any emails. Just keep sending them. It's funny because James Jones did a thing on RFN where he's like, we have none, send them to us. And I was walking in the park and I was like, sure, I'll send you an email, RFN. So I sent one while walking in the park. So I don't know if that will ever come up, but you know, it does work if people call out.
The length of time we've listened to RFN and the number of times we've written in is it's not great. I think I wrote in specially for the episode 500 back when we were Now You're Playing with Power, and Johnny Metz read it out and even shouted out Now You're Playing with Power.
I don't remember that, but
really?
That's cool.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Now You're Playing with Power is the old name of this podcast, This Nintendo Life. I think it
wasn't around for that long. It was around for about a year.
I think it was about 36. I think was it episode 42, 36? Those two numbers stand out to me. I don't know one of those. Anyway, shall we get to the first email?
Let's get some emails.
Our first email is from Chad K, who says, "Who won the draft?"
Yeah, this is the email. This email came in. The email header was episode 174, and all Chad said was, "Who won the draft?" And I don't know what this means, but Bally went and looked into the archives.
Yeah, I saw this in a lunch break, and then went on YouTube, looked up episode 174, This Nintendo Life, which was, let me just clarify, it was episode 174 from July 2020. So this was just into the pandemic.
I thought that would have been a bit longer ago, but it's not actually that long
It's
ago.
not, exactly. And so let me tell you what the draft was, MBZ.
What was the draft? I have no idea.
It's a little game that we played where we should also shout out, I think it was a Cerbis who wrote in with the original email with the draft idea. So thank you, Cerbis, for your original email way back in July 2020, if you're listening and remember that episode. And the idea was, over the next 3 years from July 2020, because now it's July 2023, we had to draft Nintendo franchises, and whichever, if a game came out in that franchise, you would get a point for it.
Oh, okay,
so,
I like it. Yes.
For example, at the time, if one of us drafted 3D Zelda, we'd get 1 point, because one game came out in 3D Zelda between 2020 and 2023, July to July. If a game was announced in that time but didn't come out yet, you still get a point. And if a game was already announced and came out in that time, you got a point, like my Zelda example.
Right, okay.
You also get a point for remakes. You do not get a point for remasters.
Okay.
And you don't get a point for mobile games. They have to be console PC.
Okay. Did the service make up all these rules?
I think we agreed these rules like in the chatter because over lunch break I listened to the episode. I wrote down all the franchises that we picked, and then I scrolled through them, picking out what games I think have come out. So I think I've got like a winner and a number of points, but we're going to do it very gradually, and you can call me out if you've got any quibbles to fight me on.
Excellent. By the way, I mean, shout out to Chad and shout out just to our listeners generally, because we would have just completely forgotten about this. And it coming through and us doing it in July also, I think, is very
totally.
good,
so thank you very much to everyone for calling us out. And if we've done other episodes that are similar to this idea, just remember to call us out. I have a feeling there's at least a couple out there. But who knows? Do you want to go first? Why don't you keep your own score, MBZ?
Oh, sure, okay.
And we can pick some game series off between. I'll pick from both lists. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. Shall we start with you? Shall we go?
Sure, go for
with
it.
a few at the bottom. So Pushmo, you got none.
0. Shit. Okay.
Luigi's Mansion, you got none.
Well, there's a remake of Luigi Mansion 2 Dark Moon, which I guess doesn't count.
Are we calling that a remake or a remaster?
It's a remaster. It's a 3DS game. So
we'll call that a remaster. That's no point. Style Savvy is a 0 that I could find.
No, because they announced a new game from that developer. It's not called Style Savvy. It's like in a different franchise name, but it is the same idea. It was shown in a Nintendo Direct. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the developer of Style Savvy making a new Style Savvy-like game. I'm
not giving you that. Come on.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Okay, it's not the same name. I guess because it's a spiritual successor, I think, that probably makes sense. Okay. But they did make something similar. Well, they're intending to. It got announced, in any case.
Box Boy is a 0.
Didn't Box Boy and Box Girl, or that already come out by 2020?
Yeah.
Shit, okay. All right.
Mother is a 0.
Yep. No, just still sitting on that.
Ring Fit Adventure is a 0.
Nothing. Yeah, damn.
This is a very surprising 0. Labo.
Yeah.
Is a 0.
I mean, I guess back in 2020, Labo was still quite fresh, right? So there was a chance.
But it already put out its last thing in spring 2020, apparently.
Oh, so that was the end of it, basically. Yeah.
Dylan's Rolling Western 0.
Was there not another Lost Dylan game before the eShop shut down? I want to say there was something Dylan related, but if you've done the research and you've looked at all the Dylan games,
I'll happily triple check the research on Dylan if you want. Let me have a little look at this.
Yeah, I feel like Dylan had like a final last hurrah in the Dylan franchise. Now, I did go and look at the 3DS eShop to see, should I buy a Dylan game? Like, it's one of those Nintendo series that I've always been like, I don't know if I'm gonna get into this ever. I mean, looking at Vanpool's record, it seems like 2018 was Dead Heat Breakers, which I think is the last Dylan game. So I think we're good on that.
Either.
There was no Dylan released in the last 3 years. So yeah.
Golden Sun is a 0.
R.I.P.
F-Zero, tragically, is a 0.
I'm noticing a trend here. Nintendo are not coming back to any of these franchises.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of ordered this list a bit to be.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are these when you going through these are ones that I've chosen, or this is between the two of us?
These are all ones that you have chosen. This is. I should also say that you are Team Ninten and I'm Team Endo.
Okay,
I'm Bally Endo
cool.
and you're MBZ Ninten.
Okay, great. Cool. Yeah, I'm not. This is a bad track record for me so far. It's not going well.
Punch Out, 0.
Nothing. Shit.
Star Fox, 0.
Fuck.
Okay, a couple of brutal ones coming up. 3D Mario, 0.
Yeah, that's rough. Holy shit.
This one's also kind of wild. 3D Metroid, 0.
Fuck.
Because Prime 4 had already been announced and hasn't come out. And Metroid Prime is remastered.
It had also already been rebooted by 2020.
Right,
so.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll stop there for your team because everything else onwards gets points.
Oh, okay.
So why don't we go through some
like
of my
this.
zeros?
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I like it.
Dr. Mario, 0. Brain Training, 0. Kid Icarus, 0. Clubhouse Games, 0.
Is that not... Didn't they do a
It
thing?
came out in like spring 2020 or 2019.
Oh,
The Switch one, yeah.
Yeah, the Switch one, yeah.
I was gambling on a sequel to that. And you in the episode, you're like, don't you think they'd probably do DLC, Bally? And I don't think either has happened, but yeah.
No.
Mario versus Donkey Kong, 0. Rhythm Heaven, 0. Is that tragic?
Oh.
Nintendogs, 0. Pilot Wings, 0. Donkey Kong, and I guess this counted for 2D and 3D, because whatever, 0. Same for Yoshi, 0. Mario Kart, 0.
Oh my god.
2D Zelda, 0.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was some game franchises that we said, these are never coming back, we're not going to do that. And one of them was Wii Sports, and that would definitely have got a point for Nintendo Switch Sports.
Are you fucking kidding me? God damn it.
So we left a handful of franchises on the cutting room floor, and one of them was Wii Sports. So yeah. All the rest I've got some points. Shall we do some points for you, and then we'll flip back to me, do some points, and go back and forth a bit? Okay, back to MBZ. Nintendo.
All right.
Pikmin. So you got Pikmin 3. That's 1 point.
Love it.
Xenoblade.
Yes.
1 point.
I mean, do we get more points for more things? I guess it doesn't count because it's a DLC. But anyway, yeah.
Sorry, I should also stipulate DLC doesn't count. I should have mentioned that in the rules.
We mentioned that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
When I say these rules, it's not rules I'm making up now. It's rules we made up then. I promise.
Yes. Yeah.
Splatoon. 1 point.
Yeah.
2D Metroid.
Fuck yes.
1 point.
Absolutely.
And then you've got some more that get you some more points. So we're gonna flip back to me.
Okay. All right. Okay. Should I stop counting mine and start counting yours?
Yeah. So how many points were you on from that? I count you as 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had Advance Wars.
Oh my god!
1 point, the jammiest point ever. Because it's kind of a remaster, but everyone says it's a remake.
It's two games together. It's a remake. Yeah.
2D Mario. 1 point.
Only squeezing it through, man. Lucky we did this now, right after the June Direct.
3D Zelda. This was just to give me 1 point.
Oh yeah, that's easy points.
Fire Emblem. It's only actually 1 point.
It is, yeah.
It's Engage, which feels weird because you think it feels like there's a Fire Emblem game every year, and there's not.
Well, there's Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes technically. If you wanted to count that as an
I did
point.
see that, and I decided that's cheating. No, Bally.
No, okay. All right.
Trust me, if you want to bend rules, there's some rules coming later you'll probably want to bend, but I'm standing by it.
All right.
Mario Party.
Fuck.
1 point. It's only Mario Party Superstars. The other one was early 2020, or was it late 2019?
Yeah, there's 2 on the system now, aren't there? Because the Superstars was basically like a bunch of Mario Party 2 and 3 and stuff mini games put into a collection,
right?
Kind of deal.
Let's flip back to you. I think I've got 5 points there.
You're at 5, yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go, MBZ. Kirby.
Yeah, Forgotten Land, baby.
Forgotten Land. Can you name the others?
Oh my god, many. Fucking the one where he eats cake.
Dream Buffet. That's 2 points.
The Star Allies remake or whatever.
Dreamland Deluxe. That was earlier this year. That's 3 points.
Okay.
There's one more.
And oh my god, thank you, Kirby. My god. I have no fucking idea.
It was Kirby Fighters. I can't remember. I think it was early. It was like on the Switch back in late 2020 or something. So yeah, 4 points for Kirby.
Yeah, that's nuts. Is Kirby Fight? I don't know. I'm just like knocking myself here, but does that count? Was that not like a 3DS thing that they just put on Switch? It might be a brand new thing. I have no idea,
I'll give it to you for now.
All right.
If I'm quibbling about points, I'll check it out later. How about that?
Okay. All right.
Right, you've got one more series.
Okay.
Pokemon.
I mean, does Scarlet and Violet count as 2?
No, come on. No. So you've got Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl.
Oh my god.
That's 1 point. You got Legends Arceus.
Yeah.
That's 1 point. You got Scarlet and Violet. That's 1 point. And you've got new Pokemon Snap.
Oh,
that's 4 points.
Fuck.
I count that as 4 points. I couldn't count any other Pokemon games. I think there might have been 1 or 2 mobile games that we weren't counting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I see that as your total being 12 points.
That's correct. Nintendo. Yeah, 12 points for me.
Okay, we're going to flip back to me. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
WarioWare. 2 points.
Oh,
the
wait.
Switch game last year and the newly announced game at the most recent Nintendo Direct.
Wait, that hadn't come out yet?
Yeah, it came out.
Get it together.
Yeah, get it together.
Fuck. Since 2020, they've 2 WarioWare games. My God.
I know, they had a drought for like 8 years and then bang, 2 games. Mario Sports.
Oh my God, come on.
2 points.
Okay, so golf and
Strikers Battle League.
Strikers. Yeah, fuck.
Okay, what am I on?
You are on, I think, 9, so I'm 3 ahead right now.
Okay, I've got 1 more series.
Oh my God, what is it? Fuck's sake.
Picross.
No! No! That's cheating. That's just like...
I've got Picross Season 5. Picross Season 6.
What the fuck, man?
Picross Season 7.
How many fucking Picross games
Season
they make?
8.
No!
And Picross Season 9.
What the fuck, dude? What the fuck? No! It's not allowed!
So I count that as 14.
Yeah, that is true.
In the episode, I picked Picross about halfway into the game, and you are just like shouting and screaming at yourself, like, why did I not pick that? That is like...
Oh my God, I knew it even back then.
Yeah.
Like...
Two of those seasons even came out in the same year.
Oh my God.
Because that's
like, this is the thing.
5 points
to win
in 3
this
years.
game, if you draft Kirby, Pokemon, and Picross, you just win this game, basically.
You were very confident with Kirby and Pokemon, and at the time I was like, shit, I think he's got this. But I count that as me on 14, you on 12.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I would have argued for you to get more with Fire Emblem Warriors, because like new Pokemon Snap is a spin-off of Pokemon, so like...
We were counting spin-offs of Pokemon as long as they were like console.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I would give you 15 points because Fire Emblem 3 Hopes counts as a Fire Emblem game. So, there you go. Bal, you smashed it. Good job.
Baliendo is the winner. We could play this game again for the next 3 years at some point. Maybe next episode. I don't know. But we can.
If someone wants to write in, let us know.
Keep that in the bag. But good game of service. And thank you very much for shouting it out, Chad. Because that was fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I know what series I'm drafting first next time.
So he's banned Picross now.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Picross and Pokemon both begin with a P, so you know that's the meta.
The
it's all about
collectible
the
games.
Ps.
None of this
Absolutely.
3D Zelda bollocks. That's not going to get.
No. Yeah, not worth it. Not worth it at all. Lovely.
Right. Our next email is from Ryan. It says, Dear MBZ and Bally, my wildest dreams have come true. One of my favorite games of all time, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, is being fully remade. So far, it looks like a lot of QOL, I guess quality of life upgrades that'll make it better for those trying it for the first time. I can't wait to play this game for the umpteenth time, but in a new light. Personally, I have great nostalgia for the original, but I also know it is a good bit of SNES jankiness. Do you have any older games that are personal favorites that you think would greatly benefit from a true remake? Even some amazing games like this one, I believe, would turn people away if they played it for the first time in today's age without a glow-up. Cheers, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this announcement was a big deal for so many people because so many people love the original Super Mario RPG, and there's, obviously the Nintendo made a lot of kind of not spin-offs, but like they did attempts to recapture that with Paper Mario and with Mario and Luigi series, but never really returned to work with Square Enix again. So it's very cool that it's finally being remade. I think it's a good example of a game in Nintendo's back catalogue that I think people were skeptical would ever get remade, but really was in dire need of it because of how visually it hasn't aged super well. I think of a lot of those games in that era where they were trying to do the pseudo 3D thing on Super Nintendo, and back then it was like, oh my god, like they're making 3D graphics with this sprite-based thing, and the further we get, the harder it is to kind of look at that stuff, especially for younger people. They're like, oh, kind of ugly and turns them off the game. So it is nice that it is.
You know who's someone who gets massively turned off by like thing that is the most slightly bit retro, and they're just like, I don't want to play this.
Okay,
is
who's
Caroline. She just cannot like. She'll do it about like N64 like polygons and things. She'll just be like, nope, can't do it. Can't even. It's like, really? Like, is it that bad? Have you tried playing the game? But anyway, yeah, she's really funny about that stuff.
Didn't you grow up with like point and click adventure games? Like, there must be something to that.
Exactly. It's like, have you seen how ugly those games are?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Day of the Tentacle and stuff. She grew up playing, so interesting.
Yeah. Which is that's curious. What about like Stardew Valley and stuff like that? Like modern kind of pixel stuff.
That's clean cut. I think it's when I think it is probably. It's funny because something like Shovel Knight turns her off, for example, but Stardew's okay.
Maybe because it's like more Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
style,
maybe.
I guess.
But there's when it's like, I think it's also games trying to be 3D and photorealistic, but then looking like harsh polygons. It makes her like, I don't know. She's on the PS1. It's like that's every game on that system. It's like,
that's what they look like.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know. Weird one.
Yeah, I mean, like thinking about this question, I was going through a list of games, and I'm like, man, there are a lot of games that, like, not being remade necessarily, but like, I've wanted to play the Bat and Kaitos games for years, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're just going to remaster those. I'm like, what the fuck, Nintendo?
There's been a random JRPG remake in at least every one of the last 10 Nintendo Directs. Like, every single one is like,
if not multiple,
we're just going to remake this game. And no, it's not Chrono Trigger. It's this other game that we're randomly pulling from the hat.
Yeah, like Star Ocean 2 in the last Direct.
Live Alive.
Like, Legend of Mana, like so many classic games. The Suikoden games are being remastered, put out there in a kind of more modern style. Like they're doing it. Like, I mean, Square even did the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, which have their issues, but I think they actually recently said, like, because of the success of those, they're going to go back and re-release a lot of their older games as well. So I think loads of RPGs are coming to the forefront and getting the remastered treatment. But Bally, do you have any personal favorites or any games that you were interested in playing but you just didn't want to go back to, that you're like, I wish that would get a remake?
I'll admit I've played all of these. I've not got a ton of curiosity that's putting me off for the fact that it's old, if that makes sense. Like, there's a ton of games that I've not got to, but I'd still be willing to play the old janky version, as it were. But
I mean, like stuff like Final Fantasy VII has been remade. Like, does that? I mean, I know you were interested in maybe going back to that at some point.
Yeah, I would happily play the original and then play Rebirth next year. I would if I hadn't. If time was it was of no consequence.
If you had a hyperbolic time chamber.
Yeah, I would happily play the original on my Switch for sure. I want to see a series like Pokemon Pinball. Like, that is one Pokemon spin-off that I really enjoy. Like, it felt impossible that Pokemon Snap was ever going to come back. And while that game didn't make my top 10 that year, I still had a really great time with new Pokemon Snap. And it was really nice to see, as someone who's been so away from the Pokemon franchise for quite a while, like, to see all these new Pokemon. But what they did well was it was remade with all these shiny new Pokemon, but then they really kept the gameplay. And I know that gameplay didn't suit everyone, including perhaps you, MBZ, but like, they kept the gameplay so akin to the first game that it kind of had that charm that I loved about it, to be honest. And I thought it was really, really nice. And it's weird that that's the spin-off they went. I guess Pokemon Snap is very beloved by Pokemon fans, and maybe Pinball's not quite as high, but I would love to see Pokemon Pinball, because they literally did one game for Red and Blue, and then they did one game for Ruby and Sapphire. They didn't even do a Gen 2 Pokemon Pinball, weirdly enough. And then that was it. And it was like one Game Boy game and one Game Boy Advance game. And that's it. Like, knowing how many generations of Pokemon there have now been since Gen 3 and how many Nintendo consoles and systems since then, it's kind of wild to me that they've not tried that out again. But maybe Pinball just isn't as popular as it was back in 2003.
Yeah, I mean, also with how obsessed they were with creating that kind of rumble feature with the giant cartridges and everything, you would have thought that with the DS, like obviously Metro Prime Pinball used the GBA slot to literally have a cartridge that you plugged in that created rumble on the DS. And you would have thought that, you know, Pokemon would have done the same thing with a DS game for Pokemon Pinball, but despite the fact that DS was wildly popular and, you know, it sold millions and millions, they never went back to it, which is definitely a shame. And I don't know, are there any real life Pokemon pinball tables? There must be like some.
Good question.
There, like,
need to ask Jeff Baccalar.
Yeah.
I have no idea. it's the kind of thing where maybe the Pokemon company is really funny about it and there might not actually be one. Who knows? I don't know how that would work. But another series of games I'd like to see remade, just so they're a bit more accessible and we can get some proper online multiplayer going, is the Contra games. Like, I think now people say, oh, you can't make the Contra games easier, then they're not Contra, but I would kind of disagree. I think there's quite a lot of bullshit in those games that you can probably iron out and still have a really challenging, fun time. Then put in a bit of online co-op and you're there. And it's a shame how few games have like online co-op modes that are games of that style. And every time one comes along and we play it, like so we played Blazing Chrome together. I mean, that was in person.
Yes.
We also played Wild Guns on the Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah.
And then we've played like 2 Contra games, 1 Contra game.
No, we've only played Contra 3.
Just Contra 3 on the SNES Classic.
I own the Contra collection on Switch, and I picked it up for the express purpose of we'll play through these at one point. Yes. But that collection has no online connectivity,
exactly.
and that sucks. So
we're getting these like ports and remasters, but like let's remake the game. Let's we can change the graphics in some way, and we can actually get some online co-op. Like that's what this game series needs, in my view. And every time we've played a game of that style, we've had an absolute blast. Like every single time. And I just think it's an area that is. I think it's weird where games in the style that are like beat 'em ups, like the TMNT game, and games that kind of came out in a similar era, are really having a renaissance. Whereas it feels like the Contra I don't know how you even what the genre of Contra is. But
it's like side-scrolling action.
Like insta-kill, insta-death, whatever.
Right. It's almost like bullet hell as a kind of... It's like what if beat-em-ups were bullet hell instead.
Exactly. I feel like there's less of a renaissance for that type of game, and it's definitely more my cup of tea than the beat-em-ups that have been kind of ported, remastered, remade, like, Streets of Rage, TMNT, that I both really like both of those games, but they're just, it's just that genre's just not really my cup of tea in the same way.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Do you want to keep going, or should I jump in with some of mine?
Let me jump in with one. It kind of comes as a pair, but like Ocarina of Time and Mario 64, I think, it's weird the games that Nintendo chooses to remake and when. And now technically both these games have been remade. Mario 64 was a launch game for Nintendo DS, and Ocarina of Time was a launch game for Nintendo 3DS, actually, I think it was. I don't want both of those games ported, but I think both of these games can have a real glow up, and they don't need like extra dungeons or extra levels or anything. They just need like a proper glow up. And then for all the people moaning about like Zelda's never going back to dungeon based Zelda, it's always going to be open world forever, and if Nintendo can do like a really good job of remaking its existing dungeon based Zeldas, especially like Ocarina of Time, which many argue is the best one, I wouldn't, but I feel like that would be a really good game to sell well, unite a fan base, and allows Nintendo to keep going on their trajectory of like doing open world Zeldas while having Ocarina of Time as like just this fantastic remade game where everyone can be like, what, Ocarina of Time, it is a real classic. And when I played Ocarina of Time on the 3DS back in, I want to say roughly 2015, 16, a bit like Pokemon Red, like Red Blue, I was expecting to have a decent time, but I thought that there would be so much jank it wouldn't actually hold up quite as well, and it holds up impeccably. That game is one of the best 3D Zeldas, and I still absolutely loved it. I think it's a fantastic game and definitely deserves a remake. And yeah, you can say the same thing about Mario 64. Like we've said numerous times how we played that collection, and Mario 64 was kind of the surprise of the bunch, and
yes,
I stand by that. Like that game, it's got some ugly looking textures and things to it, and definitely deserves a glow up, but you do not have to touch those mechanics at all. I think that by and large those mechanics felt and played really well, and I'd love to see that game glowed up and actually not have a D-pad like the remake on DS, and to actually have a circle pad. That would be, I think, it's weird that these two games are so iconic in kind of Nintendo lore, but haven't been remade in the last decade.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned before about like what other companies are doing, other publishers with their big remakes, and you look at Capcom with Resident Evil or Square with Final Fantasy, and the glow up they are giving and the modernization they are giving those games, like those are, I would say like those are reimaginings, right? Like they're full blown.
And those are games from exactly the same era.
Yeah, exactly. They're from the same, like you look at like PS1 and Resident Evil 2, and same with Final Fantasy 7. And Ocarina of Time is a contemporary, and like, I don't think Nintendo are up to the task of what those companies have done, partially because of the technology and the platforms that they can leverage right now with, current PlayStation and Xbox hardware, versus what Nintendo could potentially do. I mean, like, by the time a Switch successor comes out, I think they're closer to kind of achieving that fidelity, but I don't know, like, there's something about the storytelling of Ocarina of Time where I think you could do some really cool stuff with great voice acting and
oh my god, yes,
making the story kind of, building it out more. And I like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild a lot, but what they ultimately prove is that Nintendo can't do big storytelling with great voice acting, and that they just don't understand how to do it. Like, there's some cool moments, but it really still feels like a cartoon in a lot of ways, and I don't think they could provide the gravitas that you would want for a kind of Ocarina of Time remake in the same style as a Resident Evil 2 or a Final Fantasy 7 remake.
I used to think that this was very much a Nintendo are too Japanese and they don't fully understand like Western audience and stuff. But then Final Fantasy 7 Remake came along and I'm like, wow, they really understood like voice acting in an English speaking context and how to do that well, and like incredibly well made cutscenes and great storytelling. And I do think Nintendo have it in them to just export that aspect to some Western studio or whatever. I don't know how they would do it. And, we'll do the gameplay, you do the storytelling, and we'll merge the two together and we'll make a fantastic Ocarina of Time remake. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think they will ever do it. Feels like it's one of those projects that would be so expensive that would be very.
And we'll break the entire game into 3 parts and release it over a decade.
Absolutely.
And Nintendo would be rolling in money from that. Are you kidding me? Like
they would.
Amazing.
They could get away with it for sure.
How many of these brand new Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom fans haven't actually ever played Ocarina of Time? I would vote
most
load, like 75%. Easy.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers from pure kind of sales perspective, Breath of the Wild is triple the sales of the next best-selling Zelda. So.
Exactly. It can't be any more than a third by maths alone. So
you've
got an audience there who care about Zelda and its lore and its characters. Why don't you sell them an Ocarina of Time remake?
Yeah, Ocarina of Time is like, it's a very simple story, but it has twists and it has like, you can build from that narrative. Really cool stuff.
I think it does time travel well.
It does, yeah. Bally hates time travel, we all know.
I think it works well in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet. Any more, Bally?
Very obvious ones, but we've talked a hell of a lot about all of the JRPG remakes, but for some reason Earthbound and Final Fantasy 6 don't come up in those two.
No, they don't.
And I would obviously throw in Chrono Trigger along with those other two, and 3 of our favorite JRPGs that we've talked a lot about on this show, and it seems like every other JRPG is getting remade barring these 3 games, but I'm confident one of these 3 games will be remade in the next 5 years. I just don't know which one and when it will be.
Yeah, I think I don't know, like the success of 2D HD, even with companies who aren't Square Enix, right? Like everyone's doing it. I see a lot on Steam actually these days of like other companies just aping that style. It's become so in vogue that I feel like it's inevitable that we get there with one of those games eventually. But we'll see. I know that there was an interview that went up recently with Yoshinori Kitase, one of the creators of Final Fantasy, and obviously working on 7 Rebirth right now. But he said that a lot of his staff within Square Enix are telling him, "Hey, can we do a Final Fantasy 6 remake, please?" So I'm glad to hear that the talent, the young talent they're hiring at Square Enix right now are all Final Fantasy 6 fans, because hopefully that does happen one day. And honestly, I think as much as these HD 2D games are cool, I think 6 deserves a 7 treatment. Like it's the scale of its story and all that stuff. Like I think it deserves that.
Out of Earth, in terms of like Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, and Final Fantasy 6, I think Final Fantasy 6 might be my favorite story out of those 3. Like there's just
I think it is the strongest,
about the way that it's such a good blending of telling like solo this is a character and this is my backstory, and how that backstory links to your party, and how that links to the wider narrative of the game. Like, it does that incredibly well for a game that came out in, what, 95, 96?
It's nuts.
It's insane.
It's crazy stuff. There's some good picks there. I think for me, one that's a bit more modern, but I think, again, from an accessibility standpoint, no one has access to it. And given that they're going to make a new one, they probably should do something about that. The Professor Layton games. None of these have been modern available to people. And, those games were DS games. They were on mobile for some of them, but like, there is a glow up that you could do, because ultimately, like, when I go back to the Phoenix Wright games on DS, I'm like, oh, these do look very different from what they did in terms of remaking them and updating the art style and all that sort of stuff. And I think Layton could benefit from a similar thing, whether they make it more 3D or whether they just update it visually, graphically. I think there's a lot of stuff you can do there, and I think there's a lot of quality of life things that you could add as well, right? Which is kind of what our emailer Ryan kind of mentioned for Mario RPG, is like quality of life things are always good for these types of things. And Layton has like a whole coin finding system, which is kind of like a random pixel hunt where you tap the screen, and that doesn't really work on a system that doesn't have a touchscreen anymore, even though the Switch does. If you were to remake these Layton games, it'd have to be cross-platform for everything, and so you probably have to find a way around that to kind of modernize it. But the original trilogy, as well as the subsequent trilogy, are definitely worth putting out there, because otherwise people jumping into Layton, the next Layton 7, whatever, World of Steam or something they're calling it, people just won't have the context. And not that Layton stories matter that much, but they do matter. Like, there is a chronology here, there is a timeline of events and characters and things that happen, and I think it would be nice for everybody to be caught up on that. So I think that's just one from a, like, you are making a brand new, like, level 5 are coming back, they should probably start putting out some remakes of that older stuff, so people get more familiar, because people don't know who they are anymore, because they disappeared for like a decade. So yeah, I think that's a big one for me. One that has been remade technically, but I still had a big struggle getting into, and I really want to play it because people talk about how it's one of the best games of all time. Final Fantasy Tactics. I just couldn't get on with it. Like, I played the PSP version, War of the Lions, and the grind is really bad in that game. Like, it is like, you get to level 5, I think it is, or the fifth map, and it is fucking brutal. It is so difficult, and the game almost necessitates you to go into random maps and start grinding, and the grinding is so incredibly slow. Like, there is a pace to it that I think doesn't work in modern day, and I feel like they can really kind of cut that down and make it make more sense and pretty it up, and do something cool with it. Because I think from a storytelling perspective, a lot of the influence of stuff like 16 originates with Tactics, because Tactics introduces this kind of more political world, more kind of low fantasy, but like, again, kind of like a universe that then linked into Final Fantasy 12, like Ivalice as a setting, is a thing that I think a lot of people have compared 16 to. So there's kind of origins of that within Final Fantasy Tactics. I think with the success of 16 and the kind of storytelling it's doing, I think Tactics is ripe for a remake for a lot of people. It feels like in the Mario RPG vein of, like, there are issues with the older versions of it, and like, it could be so much more widely appealing to a bigger audience if they did a full-blown remake of that. So I think that's high on my list, because it's one of my piles of shame, but I started playing it, I remember, and I just never got on with it. I just couldn't get into it, and I really do want to. So I feel like a remake would do that justice, which would be very nice. Nice. I think similar to Mario RPG from a visual standpoint, I think the original Donkey Kong Country games probably could do with a remake, if they aren't going to give us new ones from Retro now that they're back on the Prime series. I think that...
Never thought about that. The fact that Retro have been busy doing Metroid Prime for the last 2 decades means we can't get Donkey Kong for a while.
Yeah,
like, great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a good place to start for Nintendo with that is like, hey, let's just remake the original trilogy and just put them back out there. And, those games, I still like them from a level design and kind of control perspective. They're fucking ugly. They just are. Like, I think that art style has aged super poorly, and those games don't look great. And I think if you just make, the modern Donkey Kong art style is gorgeous, and what they do, Tropical Freeze, is amazing. And I don't necessarily think you have to do that art style in particular, but I think there's a direction you can go in with a modern Donkey Kong Country game to make it look much nicer. So That's definitely up there for me. I think a lot of people are clamoring for more Fire Emblem remakes of the Japanese games, of course, and so I think those are inevitable, honestly. So I'm not going to like push hard for them because I think they just will happen. But Fire Emblem 4, 5, and 6, Japanese only, never been released here before, should get remakes at some point, and I think they probably will. So that's just kind of an inevitability. Just depends on when it's going to happen. And then Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I think, is a game that somehow is still not on a Nintendo platform, despite being a Nintendo-ass Nintendo game. And they did a remaster that they put out on PlayStation and stuff like that, but I think a full-blown remake, and I think this applies to Super Metroid as well. I think both games, frankly, suffer from, like, they're old and the controls are not super tight type of deal, and if you can remake both of those in kind of modern stylings, that would be fantastic. And it doesn't necessarily have to be modern pixel art, because I know that's very expensive and difficult for these companies, but like look at what Dread did and look at what the new Prince of Persia game is doing, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of 2.5D but supremely polished, like very shiny kind of approach to it. Like a super high res modern Symphony of the Night, I think would do extremely well, and I think is a good way of bringing that game back for a more modern audience as well. So that's definitely high on my list of games. So yeah. That's pretty much what I would choose to remake. Obviously on an individual selfish level, I just liked it because there was rumors of Mercury Steam doing a Fusion remake before Dread happened, and like it'd be nice if they went back and did that for other people.
It'd be wild if Fusion gets remade before Super Metroid, but I'd put good money on both of them getting remade in the next like 15 years.
And I think like Mercury Steam having teased Fusion stuff at the end of Samus Returns, like I don't know if they return to that or if there's going to be another brand new 2D Metroid, which I would always go for a brand new one over a remake. But
did none of the teased stuff at the end of Samus Returns link to Dread?
I think it does because there is X-Parasite stuff in Dread, right? Because it's a
okay.
direct sequel to Fusion. So some of that stuff does link in. It's just kind of I think the intention at the time, they used one of the, the first enemy from Fusion, the little frog guy who gets attacked by the X-Parasite.
Yes.
Like he is at the end screen, the secret ending or whatever of Samus Returns.
Right.
So I think that's why, because I think the intention at that point in time before Samus Returns had come out was, after we do this, we're going to remake Fusion and then we'll see what happens, basically. But I would like to see that.
It'll come.
I don't need it to be fair. Like I think Fusion is a perfect game as it is, but I think for a lot of people, it could stand to be modernized. And I think there's a lot of chatter around when Dread came out of like, you can't play the prequel to this game, the narrative prequel to this game, because it's locked on the Wii U, and now you can't because the Wii U eShop doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, all gone.
Right, we've got two emails that kind of link together. So we're going to read the first one and then we'll roll it into the second one. So Mark C says, "Hi guys, quick question for you. My family and I are visiting London and Edinburgh for the first time in August. I'm just wondering if there are any video game related stores that I could check out while I'm there. Also, are there any favourite sites we should check out that are not covered in a tourist guidebook? My son and I both love the show. We've been listening for the last 3 or 4 years. Thanks, Mark C from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." And then Miran Doom says, "Hello, Bally and MBZ. The price of used video games has gotten increasingly absurd in recent years. However, I still find used game stores charming and fun to visit. What are some of your favourite used game stores that you've been to? Bonus points if they're in Scotland, as I will finally be visiting there later this year." Got everyone coming to Scotland. Great to hear. Some favourites of mine in my home state of North Carolina are Limited Run Retail, Lost Art Games, and Game Giant. As the name implies, Limited Run Retail is the physical store for limited run games. It has a cool retro vibe and a section dedicated entirely to used games. Lost Ark is a cool shop with a ton of plushies, gachapon, and even an arcade. It definitely leans into the anime aesthetic, but has a good selection of games as well. Lastly, Game Giant is a chill shop with reasonable prices and 2 huge walls lined with video games. I almost always find something to pick up when I venture out there. Hope you guys are doing well. Cheers, Miranda.
Alrighty.
So we should move to the US, MBZ. That's what I'm reading from this.
I think there are 2 cultural institutions that exist more in America than they do in the UK, and those are arcades and mom and pop game stores. Because quite frankly, neither of those really feature in either of our childhoods or like are a cultural institution over here. Like arcades exist, but they were always like, oh, it's a place where you do like air hockey, or there's maybe one like DDR machine.
And like the gun will be broken, or the DDR button will be bashed.
It's like Time Splitters basically is the only like arcade game, I would say, that sort of stuff. And yeah, the same goes for video game shops, because really the corporations took over. I mean, the corporations have taken over everywhere, but there wasn't any, like, I don't remember growing up at all going to any kind of used game stores, anything of that kind. They just
there was like a pre-owned section in Game, and before that EB Games, and then Game Station was kind of like later. But then Game Station completely vanished.
Game Station? Yeah. I would say Game Station is closer to this, but it's still like a company that then eventually got bought by Game and subsumed into that.
And what felt different about Game Station was I feel like they had a little more emphasis on pre-owned games. I think they also had a little more emphasis on like video game tat that like aren't video games. Totally. Whereas Game always felt, for the most part, like walls and walls lined of video games, and there is basically nothing else you can buy there other than a handful of game guides, which are mainly sold to my mother.
It's where all the money was made, by the way.
And like,
half of Prima's income from the early 2000s was Bally's mum buying the guides.
And nothing else really. I don't remember a ton of plushies at Game. Like there'd be like a handful.
It's
maybe.
So different now. Like that half of Game is that shit now.
Oh really?
Like, I've been in recently, and it's like, yeah, there's games there, but like they really have so much fucking merch, because that's the way of digital these days, right? Like they're clearly seeing a drop off, and I think, you know, in the US, GameStop as well is going through a similar thing. But yeah, there isn't really a culture, which I think is a shame for people, especially, you know, both these emails where like, oh, I hope there's some cool game stuff we can check out, and we're like, not really. Like
I think there's also a big caveat I should add is that even if you do find like a cool game stuff thing in the UK, and there will be some out there, we're just not very knowledgeable about them. I would argue probably in Edinburgh, as mainly in London. But when you do find these places, the idea of like finding cool stuff that has anything to do with Nintendo, in my view, is incredibly slim. Like it'll all be PS1, PS2 era, because that is just kind of what dominated in the UK when we're talking about like retro times from early 90s onwards ish. Like that's just completely dominated our childhood. So like we were the odd ones playing Nintendo systems basically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like if you go to, so the one shop that does have old games that I do frequent, I mention it on the show a lot, and it's where I get a lot of my used game stuff, is a chain called Computer Exchange, CEX, and that is the only place that I really find old games, and it has become increasingly harder to find stuff that
there are loads of them, actually. There's so many.
Right. I think this is the difference, right, is that in the UK, even with GameStation and CEX, these are franchised stores. They are a part of a larger company that owns them all. There are not really, at least from what I've seen, one-off owned by a family or something. There's no kind of businesses of that sense that just do pre-owned games, or like are places you can go to where you can actually talk to people and like have a conversation and stuff like that.
You have a nice positive experience, and you're talking to someone that actually really cares about their shop, and even though they're charging you 10 extra quid, you don't mind too much because you're at least supporting this small shop. You like never have that experience in the UK.
No,
I've had it in the UK with board gaming, but I've never really had it with video gaming.
Yeah, totally. And like, so if there is a kind of shop that does that sort of stuff, it will also have like manga, anime, you know, Japanese kind of inspired stuff, right? All be kind of bled together. But CEX is definitely a place that I still go. Every time I go past it, I'm like, I'm going to pop in and see if there's anything there. I think I've talked about the copy of Chibi Robo for £200 that has been in my local one for like going on like 10 years now. I don't think it's there anymore. I think someone did something with it, because I haven't seen it in a while. But there is a vanishingly small, because I'm interested in, right now, I want to buy Wii games, GameCube games. That's usually what I'm going there for. And anything else is like DS I don't care as much about, because that they're very easy to emulate, and like I mean that's the same. I can emulate everything on a Steam Deck, of course I can, but I think because I have a Wii U set up still, I like the idea of Wii games, especially because Wii games it's so hard to do emulation because it's all motion control based and you need to have the proper setup. So for me, it's just better to buy a game that's on Wii rather than emulate it, because I actually spent a lot of time with my Steam Deck trying to get Disaster Day of Crisis to work, and there's just so much like tinkering with the controls you have to do to get different types of motion, to work on a system that wasn't built for it. So for me, I'm still on the lookout for a physical copy of Disaster Day of Crisis, even though, it's one of those games that people don't have great things to say about it. Like, look, it's a Monolith Soft game. I have to play it at some point. It was only ever released in Europe and Japan. It was never in America. So Disaster Day of Crisis, an RFN classic, I'm still searching for at some point. And if I find it, I will fucking buy it. And then I will actually play it on...
For £200?
Not for two. I'm not spending fucking £200.
What's your limit for if you find it?
If I saw it for like 45, I might be like, yeah, sure, I'll do that.
I feel like Gex would charge way more for it than that, but yeah.
I don't know if they would know the value of it also. So,
I would be interested in what sources they use to determine value, because sometimes you get really obscure, like, I don't know, cheap stuff, and like when they get an abundance of people, like you can buy Wii Fit without the Wii balance board for like, I don't know, £2 because they know that they don't have enough balance boards to sell back to you. They just have the disc, and who wants to buy the Wii Fit disc without Wii Fit balance board? But yeah.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I think that just searching for harder to find stuff becomes harder and harder here because of the lack of people who... Wii is much easier because the Wii was actually successful here, right? It was the rare Nintendo console that did well in the UK because it did well everywhere, right? But GameCube... You
say that, but I don't think... Obviously, it didn't sell a ton of software.
Yeah, I mean, the software that it did sell is generally like party games and stuff like that, and that's... tends to be what you see in these shops.
That's often what appears, yeah.
Right, is all that tat, and like, you're not going to find Pandora's Tower or The Last Story very easily, which are the things that I'm looking for, right? So if I do find that stuff, I jump on it as soon as I can. But I found some cool stuff, like Endless Ocean I've got from there. I've got stuff like Koro Rinpa. Like there's some Wii deep cuts that I've always been looking for, and I have a good number of them now, which is nice. But GameCube is really hard. Like the GameCube section is usually 7 games, and one of them is Mario Kart, one of them is Pokemon Colosseum, and none of them cost anything under around £40. Like still, that's how Nintendo games hold their value. These GameCube games, Smash Melee, is still like £35.
That's what Nintendo value their GameCube games at.
Absolutely, right? Like it's crazy. Like you can still find Metroid Prime for like a decent price, right? Which is it's nuts, but that's just how it works. And yeah, any other console is like there's a lot of PS3 and 360 stuff because that was huge, and that stuff is still there. PS4, like modern stuff, lots more of that stuff versus the Wii and the GameCube, and even 3DS. Like I struggle to find good 3DS stuff, honestly. Like that's one of the reasons why I was going on a spending spree, because I know what the market looks like from a physical standpoint, and there are games that I'm still looking. Like there's one Layton game that I didn't pick up in the 3DS closing down eShop, and I'm still kind of searching for it physical because I would like, and that's part of the previous question we answered of like, hey, what games do you want to see remastered? One of Layton's, so that I can actually get it and not have to get it in illicit means would be nice, because again, the 3DS is another system that I like to get the actual game for, because you can't emulate 3D. Like the 3DS is the only system that does it, so that's why I was very... I wonder if like with Switch I will be, because you think I'll do this where I'm going to buy all these Switch games right at the end of life cycle.
I mean, but if you did the equivalent of what you did on 3DS to Switch, I think you're going to have to move in with me, MBZ, because like I don't know where this money's going to come from.
No, totally. But like I do think that there's a distinction to be made with 3DS specifically. Part of the reason I went so ham on it is I know that emulation won't fix this problem. That's like Wii and 3DS are very specific examples where actual hardware is so much better to buy stuff for, because you won't get the same experience. You just won't get the same experience doing it via emulation.
I was just going to say the Switch has like 10 times the number of games than 3DS does.
It does, yes, it does.
Tricky,
but the thing is, a lot of Switch games, much more like, hey, you can just emulate, they're just video games.
peasy.
You can just emulate them. It doesn't matter. So, and also there's a chance that they'll carry stuff over to the next system. So
yeah, a chance.
But I know that you are, again, less kind of frequently going to places like Computer Exchange.
I'm just too busy playing the new stuff to play the old stuff, but yeah.
Anything that you've picked up from there, or any games that you're looking to pick up potentially from the past?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to play the Layton games on 3DS or DS. And I mean, it was very nice that the Phoenix Wright trilogy came to Switch. I'm looking forward to playing the second one sometime, but like, it's just a handful of gaps in my knowledge that I would rather see a remake than have to fork out the money for the original on whatever system. I'm also guilty of having it now unplugged my Wii U. I think the final straw was when Mario Kart 8 came out. Well, when the DLC came out on Switch, and I bought it finally on Switch. I was like, well, now my Mario Kart machine is null and void, so I guess we're going to unplug that. So yeah, I'm not massively into the buy an old game and play an old game thing. I'd rather just play the mainstream stuff that comes to, like, Switch Online and all these, and the Nintendo Super Nintendo Classic and that kind of thing. So the last game I bought was actually, this was the day before Bally Jr. No, it was the day of, actually, or maybe it was the day after. I'm going back and forth. I'll go with day after. Yeah. The day after Bally Jr. was born, I went out to a Kex near the hospital and bought Bayonetta 2.
Yes.
I think I spent like £35 on the Switch version.
Man, I think it's cheaper on the eShop.
It wasn't when I checked.
Sure.
It was like 40, 45, 50 or something.
Okay.
So I did save a little bit of money, but yeah. And the box comes with Bayonetta 1, but then the guy made very clear to me, this does not come with Bayonetta 1, and I was like,
yes,
okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Because it's like a code thing.
And after playing Bayonetta 2, I didn't want to play Bayonetta 1 anyway. It's all good. But
so I guess the next time you go there will be when I give you an old game to play that you can't get anywhere else.
Exactly. That's when I will go back to Kex. But yeah, I remember that time fondly. Caroline was in the hospital, and I was like, I'm going to go out and get some lunch and go to Kex, because why not? But yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Cool. Well, I think that is going to do us for today's show.
We got to briefly talk about things to see in Scotland. Come on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I totally forgot. That was the start of the first email. But yes, Bally, go ahead. Wax lyrical about Scotland.
Okay, so the question was like places in Scotland, I guess, or London, that are not covered in the tourist guidebook.
Right.
I think so. Me and Caroline love like walking and hiking. I never see tourists around the Pentlands. So the Pentlands is like this mini, it's not a mountain range, it's hills. It's a hill range. What's a hill range called?
They're big hills.
They're big hills to the south side of Edinburgh. You can get an incredible view of Edinburgh by going to the Pentlands. You can do a thing called the Pentland Round, which is like a 13-mile hike all the way around the Pentlands, which is really awesome. But there's so many shorter hikes in and around the Pentlands. If you want like what, Highland Scotland feels like, but just on a really low level, the Pentlands are great because they're so close to Edinburgh, and you can get some really good views of Edinburgh. Because all the tourists, they're going to go up Arthur's Seat, which is like the hill right in the middle of Edinburgh. They're all going to go up there. The tourists, they don't go to the Pentlands. So try and like get a bus or rent a car to the Pentlands, and you will have a great time hiking there. And then I'd say a top tip in the city is all the tourists always go to the Old Town, which is worth doing. The Old Town is very beautiful, very lovely. But an area of Edinburgh that has a lot of history and is very beautiful and has nice restaurants and is by the water, I'd recommend Leith, which is quite near to where me and Caroline live. Like it's shocking during tourist times of year how many lovely parts of Edinburgh, in my opinion, just don't see any tourists, and they all just go to the Old Town and a little bit of the New Town, when I would highly recommend Leith. And you can get a tram there. Tram all the way from the airport all the way into Leith now. That's just opened this year. So
have you been on a tram? Because I've not been on one.
Yeah, I've been on the tram, and Caroline and I are going to Hamburg next weekend, and we're going to get the tram to the airport. So yeah,
there you go.
It's going to be Bally Junior's first time on a plane, which is exciting. But
fun times.
Yeah. Other tips for Edinburgh. Just try to go to independent like food places, because there are lots of good ones. but there's an awful lot of chains. But if you want to try some of the British chains, I'd highly recommend the chains because they're good too. But yeah, have you got any tips for Edinburgh, MBZ?
I mean, I'm just a food person, so I'll just say Bros Bagels is very good. Again, I think there's one in Leith and there's one near Portobello. Portobello's also a place you can go down by the sea. Nice little walk down there. You can get some fish and chips, that sort of thing. But Bros Bagels is a bagel place and it's very nice. There's basically every time I go to Edinburgh, there's like a hit list of food that I need to have. So that's one of them. Another one is the fish and chips down by
New Haven.
What the fuck? The one nearby my house, basically. The one down the road.
That one's so overrated, honestly.
It's not. It's amazing. It's fucking great. It's so good.
It's also like the most expensive fish and chips in Edinburgh.
It's not that bad. It's fine. It's really good. It's really good. That fish and chips is great. So don't listen to Bally. Go there. It's very nice.
It's called the Fish Market or something.
Fish market, yes, absolutely, and but it's nice because it's by the water, right? And you've got all the boats.
Okay, I'll give you that. Like as in like a picturesque, because it looks like a little traditional fishing town village, and that's right.
And
next
you can
to
sit
Leith.
outside in the summer if it's nice and the rare
yeah.
one day of the year it's nice in Scotland. Then you can, and often we go there and we either get it and sit in the car if it's cold, or just sit outside.
It's actually where the cruise ship tenders drop off tourists. So
yes,
I would suggest it's quite on the tourist path, but it's still very good.
Yeah. It's worth going to. I like it a lot. Then also Desi Pakwan, which is a Indian takeaway, which is extremely good. And if you want something spicy, if you want something,
I think they're shut at the moment for like renovations or something.
Okay, that's a shame. But that is a top place to go to eat. And my last one is Korean barbecue, Korean BBQ. There's a couple of locations.
We went to one really near me. Me and Caroline. That was really good.
Yeah. And yeah, that's great because usually in Korean barbecue, down in London anyway, you have to pay for additional lettuce or sauces, all that sort of stuff. They do endless refills here, which is the best.
Yeah.
And
you've got a big plate of meat, and you need stuff to get through the meat with lettuce and the sauces, and to get free refills is a huge one.
It's real good.
One more picturesque place I don't think the tourists go that much is Gullin. So Gullin is kind of in between Edinburgh and North Berwick, and it's white sandy beaches with amazing views of the Firth of Forth, which is the water estuary beside Edinburgh. I'd highly recommend that. Just get out of the new town and the old town, as great as they are.
Sure.
That's where all the tourists are, and if you want to stay away from there, the touristy areas, I'd highly recommend all the stuff we've listed.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Any London top tips, MBZ?
I don't go anywhere in London, so I don't know. But also London is everything is touristy in a sense. There's definitely places you can go that are a bit more hip.
It's wild how concentrated the tourists are in Edinburgh compared to London.
Yeah, totally. If you want to go to a good pub, Shandos is probably the pub we go to the most.
On Trafalgar Square.
On Trafalgar Square, yeah, obviously it's a prime location, but my dad has been going there since he was 16, and so it's the pub we go to in town all the time. So yeah, Shandos is a good pub, but yeah, not much else aside from that, I would say. So yeah, I think that, Bally, will wrap us up for emails. But if people would like to send them, where can they send them to?
Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We'd really appreciate hearing what you think of Edinburgh and Scotland. Let's hear about it.
Absolutely. And you can also send emails in the Discord channel as well. Link to the Discord in the description of the show notes. Go check it out. Along with a link to our YouTube channel, where if you want to listen to the show there, you can do that as well. But Bally, we are also supported on this fine show by some folks over on a website called Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, you can get bonus episodes, you can get fun things to listen to, and we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, and Turtle. Thank you for your support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated, the support you give the show. We very recently put out an episode of ThisNintendoLife where we talked a lot about long narrative cinematic games, including Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Final Fantasy 16. So I think we're going to talk about those probably again next time, but who knows?
Yeah.
You can listen to all episodes of ThisNintendoLife for $1.
Absolutely. So go check it out if you are so inclined. Obviously, you can find the show in various places across the internet. You can find us on Twitter, a platform that still exists, at TNL Podcast, for updates and links to other stuff as well. Bally, where can they find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
You can find me on Twitter at LordMBZ, but you can also find me on Threads, because that's a thing. That's a thing that happened in the last time since we recorded. I don't know, Bally, you're just not on Threads yet.
I'm just slow. I'll get there. I don't know.
Yeah,
I need to see.
I don't know.
I need to see which way the wind's blowing before I jump.
No, I get it. I have barely used Thread since I got it, if I'm honest with myself. Like, I'm there. I've threaded like 3 times or something.
Is a thread
it's just
a tweet?
Fucked up, man. I guess.
Because
I don't know.
multiple tweets can be a thread. That's the confusing thing. I think Mark Zuckerberg knew exactly what he was doing.
Our world is so fucked up now that, like, because Twitter has such a dominance, I just will call it a tweet. I just will call it a tweet. That's what it's called, all right? Yeah. And, like, it's so hard to break out of that. It has just dominated for so long to such a degree that there's no other way around. That's just what it is. And, I think that Threads kind of sucks because it's like algorithmic, you know, and I fucking hate algorithmic stuff for Twitter. I just don't like it. I want to follow people I want to follow. Like, TikTok's a different platform. I get it. That's what that's for. But for Twitter, I just want to follow people I want to follow, and I want to see what the fuck they're saying. And this algorithmic bullshit is not what I'm here for. So it's been like an on-off relationship with Threads so far. Like,
sounds like a solid start.
You know, they have 100 million people signed up already, Bally, so they don't need any help.
And what's Twitter on?
Fine. I don't know, actually, but like, I think the reason this took off is because Instagram, you can make it if you have an Instagram account instantly, so it was very easy for a lot of people to do it. You know, it's Facebook, it's a nightmare, but like, Elon Musk is more of a fucking nightmare, so if I'm going to cast my lot anywhere, I think, you know, we'll see how it goes.
Well done, Mark.
Well done, Mark. What a nice little man. I'm just waiting for a Blue Sky invite, that's all I'm waiting for, and we'll see what happens with that also, but... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this episode will come incredibly dated, and next week Threads.
I mean, at some point we're going to promote the Twitter account, and no one's going to be on Twitter.
No,
that's the reality,
exactly. But. Yep. So we'll slowly get there. But if you do want to follow me on Threads, I'm at LordMBZ on there as well. So go say hi to me, I guess. Cool. You can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify. We're on Stitcher. You can download us. You can rate us, review us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify itself. Go do that. Go give us some nice ratings, reviews. We like to see it. It's good. It's helpful. It's appreciated. And yeah, it's a good thing to do. I think that does it. I think that's going to wrap us up, Bally. We're racing for impact with Olimar and friends.
What's his ship's called? The Octopath.
Octopath, yes, absolutely. Remember that from a Smash Brothers trophy, of course. Looking forward to that next time. We'll hopefully have played a good amount of Pikmin 4 the next time we catch up with everybody. But until then, thanks for listening, and we will be back soon with some more podcasting, some more Nintendo. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Vancouver Velocity from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, copyright Nintendo 2023.